Angela, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. We're going to cover a topic that we have not covered yet, and that is midterm rentals. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me, Steph. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. Well, I, like you, have had two careers in my life. My first career was in commercial lending and did that for decade or so throughout all of the United States with Silicon Valley Bank, which, as we all know, is made the news not in a good way in the last year. But so really got my feet wet there and really understanding the financing side. But then moved in around 2000 over to fully furnished corporate rentals, and really haven't looked back. I really enjoy this industry quite a bit. It's very much a service-oriented industry, but gives us the opportunity to work with a lot of real estate investors that are interested in putting their properties into our program so that they can rent to corporate rentals. So look forward to speaking about that.
Awesome. Thank you. When did you make the move and why did you do it?
I made the move officially in 2004 because I decided to move to Denver, Colorado. And while I had moved several locations with the bank, it wasn't a move that was going to transfer with them. So I had met up with this company from a friend that I knew in college, and had been helping them actually for a couple of years remotely before that. And just decided it was time. I'd had my real estate license since 1995 in California. And my parents owned rental property when I was young. So I always had a love for real estate and knew that I would probably end there someday, even though I didn't start there, and really haven't looked back. So
Most people don't.
yes.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us what exactly are midterm rentals, and then we'll jump into why should someone have offer a midterm rental as an investor?
Yeah, I think most people are very familiar with long-term unfurnished rentals. And then obviously in the last decade, the whole short-term rental has been very popular with Airbnb. And these midterm rentals have kind of slid under the radar for quite some time, but we're making more headlines now because so many cities are prohibiting the short-term rentals. Like if you look at what happened in New York, and even here in Denver, we've got a lot of regulation around short-term rentals, whether you need a license or whether you're restricted in which kind of properties you can offer, whether it has to be your primary residence or whether you can only do it for 90 days. Just a lot of regulations kind of happening around the short-term rentals. And so what people are finding is that instead of either selling the property, especially in this real estate market, or switching it back to an unfurnished long-term rental, they have another opportunity to be able to keep the rental furniture there and still be able to make a higher yield than they would renting it unfurnished. And the nice thing about midterm rentals is if you work with a corporation like ours, you could rent them to corporations in the area. So you've got a really solid customer base. No one's going to do anything to their corporate apartment that will make them get disciplined at work. And the average stay is about 9,900 days. So you do have a couple of turns a year. But nowhere like what you were doing with Airbnb in terms of maybe a couple of nights and then a turn and a couple of nights and a turn. So it's really a nice medium compared to the fully furnished, compared to the unfurnished rental.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And, even as you were alluding to earlier, even the great state of Texas that is known to be very, pro business, pro property
Yes.
owners. they have new short-term rental regulations in quite a few cities already.
Absolutely. And especially, we have a couple of offices in California where, the rules and laws around renting properties are really very much geared toward the tenant or the occupant. And so I think by having the corporation renting the property and really for a specific assignment, it's not like you're going to have somebody end up squatting or staying there for beyond their term of what they're allowed, which also allows you to keep the rental rate up with the market. So once someone moves out, obviously you're not subject to rent control or things like that. You can set your new market. So if the industry or the real estate market is on an upswing, you can certainly get the increased prices related to the upswing. And I also think it's just a nice way to diversify your overall portfolio. If you're heavy in real estate, maybe commercial real estate, it's another way to stay with kind of that commercial customer, if you will, even though it's on the residential side. So, just a little bit different offering, if you will. Now, corporations, they do want very high-end properties. They're paying top dollar for the property, so they want everything perfect. They want nice finishes, really with today's requirements. Is it granite countertops? Is it stainless steel appliances? Washer and dryer in the property? Does it have parking? Things like that. And really wanting it to be close to the offices, so close to a city center. Sometimes I have people call me up and they're like, I have a perfect property. It's only a 10-minute drive from downtown Denver. And I'm like, oh, I'm looking for a 5-minute walk,
Yeah.
not a 10-minute drive. So there are some specific items that corporations will look for, but we could certainly walk anyone through whether their property would meet those requirements and whether it would be good for a midterm rental.
Okay. No, those are great points. I actually can think of a couple of properties that I have that could qualify for that. Now that you're
Oh, yes.
mentioning in all these levels. So maybe for the
Yeah,
education of our listeners, maybe we can go through these questions live so that you
absolutely.
could qualify a house in real time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, did you have a specific property in mind that you wanted to
Yeah.
go over? Okay. Yeah.
So if
So
you
where
want to
is
go
it
ahead and ask the
located?
questions,
Yeah,
so people can learn from it, that would be, I think it would be
absolutely.
interesting.
So the property you have in mind, where is it located?
It is a 5-minute drive from downtown Dallas.
Oh, very nice. And certainly Dallas is a very robust area. It doesn't even have to be all the way in the downtown, just because Dallas has so many offshoots, whether it's Frisco or Plano or even over by the airport. So Dallas is a very great area. And then is it a house or condo or
It's a
townhome or
condo, townhome,
condo? Oh,
two
great.
bedroom, 2.5 bath
Oh,
townhome.
that's a perfect size. So a lot of the corporations will, so say they're bringing consultants in on assignment, they might want 10 one-bedrooms in an area because they want them all to have their own separate property to go into when they're off of work. But also a lot of times they may double them up. So, okay, let's put 2 consultants in if it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So that could certainly work. And then another use is relocation. So are they relocating a family or are they relocating an individual that just wants additional space? Maybe the second space as like an office or a guest bedroom, or maybe one of the spouse is temporarily relocating and they want a second bedroom. So if the family comes to visit, they have a place for them to stay when they come and visit. So a 2-bedroom is a wonderful option. And then does the community itself have any amenities with it or
No, no,
no?
just
Okay.
gated
But
community.
oh, it's a gated community. That's wonderful.
Yes,
And then is there anything nearby though, like gyms or, is it close
not
to,
really, not
not
really.
really?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it have its own washer and dryer in the
Yes.
property? Okay, perfect. And then is it currently furnished, or are you renting it unfurnished?
It's unfurnished, but we were thinking of doing an Airbnb there, furnish it for that.
Yes. Yes, and I'm not sure about Dallas laws and Airbnb, so I'm not sure. I know some of the cities very well, but I don't know Dallas's and what their restrictions are. Um, and certainly having, the primary bedroom, with a king or queen bed is very nice. I've also seen people put a queen in the second, or they put two twin beds in the second, because then the twins could be pulled together and create a king. So if you did have two consultants, then they could both have, a kind of similar size bed. The other thing is that corporations do like to have TVs in different spaces. So especially with a 2-bedroom, you'd probably have a TV in the living room as well as in the bedrooms. And streaming service is certainly the way to go as far as not having the recurring monthly expense of cable. But you just have to have excellent internet, because mostly while they're working at a particular office, and that's why they have the property for that location, a lot of times it's hybrid. So they may be spending a couple of days at the property, working from home at the condo. So you just want to make sure you have very fast internet service.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
And from, putting my landlord's hat on, where would you market it? Where would you market the property?
So we do work with hundreds of corporations already. So we would kind of let our existing customer base know that, okay, we've got an additional property in this area. But then specifically, we could also target certain corporations that might be very close to your location. So if you're near a hospital, or you're near a corporate center, just kind of looking around and seeing, what might be nearby. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a city as large as Dallas. There's a lot of manufacturing plants that can be in the middle of nowhere, but they use corporate housing a lot. Of course, you are tying yourself to that one company. So there's some risk there in terms of, how many corporations are nearby that might be able to use the property. So that's a consideration.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I know of cities that do have that problem in a good way, meaning a lot of companies are moving there, small towns in the middle of nowhere, and
Yes.
they don't have enough housing.
Yes.
So,
And certainly, a lot of times cities will look at it and they're like, oh, we don't have enough housing, so we need to restrict the Airbnb, or we need to restrict all of these other kinds of housing so that we just have the long-term unfurnished. But the corporate housing is a real key piece in getting a company to move to your area, because they're always going to give corporate housing to the employees first, whether it's, depending on the level of employee, 30, 60, 90 days, or whether it's an executive that might get a year or 2 years. And if they can't house those employees on a temporary basis before they can find their permanent, they may not consider that city. So while lots of the cities are looking at really trying to restrict this kind of housing, but then they want these corporations to come in and move their headquarters to their area, they don't realize they're undermining themselves.
interesting. Welcome
Yeah.
to California.
Yes. Yes.
So another scenario I see here are short-term rentals that are seasonal. So let's say an area that doesn't get a lot of rentals during winter time. That could be an option as well,
It could,
depending on the
absolutely.
area.
And certainly, even if so we have an office in Phoenix, and obviously over the summer, it can be over 100. I think this year they hit over 100 degrees, over 100 days in a row. So people are fleeing from there during that time frame. And normally there's a lot of rentals available, but we do have a steady stream of business year round where we may not get the high rents that we do in high season, but we can certainly keep it occupied during that period of time. It's not like all corporate goes away. So a little bit less of seasonality that you might get from a vacation rental. Like if you're on the coast in Florida or things like that, you might have a really great busy summer season, but what do you do the rest of the year? And can we fill that with corporate rentals during other seasons of the year as well?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so just like any other asset class, I'm sure there are some cons to midterm rentals. Could you share what they are?
Sure. And certainly, we are subject to corporations and their ebbs and flows. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's only good in an up environment. Because when there's a down environment, we do see movement of employees when they consolidate locations. So maybe they're closing this office and they're going to relocate everyone to this office. Now, of course, if your property is located near the office that closed, that could certainly be a con. And then there are times where we can be affected by the overall economy. Like if the government shuts down for a week and everyone takes a deep breath and they're like, oh, what's going on? How long will they be closed? So we could see pockets of times when everyone is just kind of taking a breath and trying to adjust to the new economy. But then once they do start making those plans, like either closing places, or maybe they're going to expand, or maybe interest rates are rising and everyone's kind of taking a breath and saying, okay, how is this going to affect business? But normally businesses will start to adapt to that and start to make some sort of change. And that change is good for corporate housing.
Incredible. Yeah, but
Yes.
everything has risk in
It
it.
does. And I do have to say, corporations do not relocate people, and they do not start new assignments in the month of December. That doesn't mean that we go vacant in the month of December, but if your tenant happens to leave in December, the likelihood of us finding somebody new before January 1 definitely slips. So
Get on it
that is
very
another
quickly,
point.
everybody.
Exactly.
Wow, that has been wonderful. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you think is important for our audience to know?
I think also, not just diversifying across classes, but also diversifying across location. So not putting all of your properties in Denver or Dallas, or, what can I do in terms of putting some of this type of property in different cities across the country? So what we saw in COVID, obviously everything shut down, but shortly thereafter, about 3 weeks after, all of our clients left California, and then they were filtering into other areas that we have in the country, or they left
Yeah.
New York and were filtering. So our New York and San Francisco, LA area was definitely hit a little bit harder in COVID, but
Yeah.
then the rest of the country was booming. So it's that change. Once people take that breath and adapt, then where are they going? So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah.
now another example of that would be property insurance. So in some states, it's doubling,
Oh
tripling,
yeah.
quadrupling. And so if you have properties in different states, you can leverage that and not
Yes.
be as
Yes.
affected.
We've got some properties in Miami that are really getting hit with that insurance piece right now. And it's very hard. I mean, you need the insurance, but how can we, can we justify a price increase that covered that insurance that we might not have been able to do a year ago or 2 years ago? So it's definitely something to consider when you're looking at each property, all of the costs. Property taxes, I know here in Colorado, property taxes really jumped this last year. The legislature is trying to do something to give relief back because it did jump so much. But, that was kind of an unforeseen cost that just hit when they issued the new insurance this year, I mean, the new property taxes this year. So all of the pieces, not just your mortgage and your utilities, but the insurance, the taxes, all of that.
Yeah. Wow, Jennifer, thank you
Yeah.
so much. That has been wonderful. How can our listeners
Yes.
get in touch with you?
They can find us at avenuewest.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Angela Healy, Healy, and then, or Angela at avenuewest.com.
Thank you so much, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me, Steph.